we can spend some time for discussion. And then I invite all the speakers at the table. We have to take some chairs more. And I invite also a Fullerton, if you want to share, to help me in manage the discussion. I imagine that during the morning, several information, we receive a lot of number of information, and so you could have some questions to put to the speakers, and we have time now to use the presence of all these professionals to exchange. No.
Thank you. Say. Hey, thank you. Yeah, good. Thanks, Kevin.
You can first. Okay. Or if you like, you can do without.
Okay, it's been a long and very informative morning, but if you can bear with us for a little bit longer, as Andrea says, the conditions are a little bit manx, so it would be nice to have some feedback and some questions from the floor. You won't probably get this opportunity again anywhere to have this group of experts that have talked to us this morning, and the information they've given us is second to none. So this is an opportunity we probably won't get again. For me, my name is John Fullerton. I'm a sailing journalist, freelance. I have a little website called Grand Prix Sailing. When I heard about the Foiling Week some months ago, I was really enthusiastic. I decided I must be there. This is something that I need to attend as a sailing journalist, and I'd like to see more others here, but we can spread the word for them. And as I say, this is a chance to speak to these people. So I think it would be nice just to get some general questions. If you have some questions for anybody particularly, maybe you can address them by name, otherwise to the panel, and we can get some discussion, some feedback going. Maybe I can start the ball rolling just to get some little momentum and generally ask the panel. Maybe I start with Martin, as you started the discussion from the development, and just ask you and anybody else who'd like to contribute in the next 5 to 10 years, let's say, what do you think will be the next significant development in the area of foiling and flying boats? Maybe just to get a...
I think the main focus will be on making sailing those boats easier, such that a wider group of people can really handle them. Of course, the performance also, but I think in terms of performance, we are already not that bad. The big next step, a big improvement has still to be done in handling, ease of sailing with those boats. And then it will take, or we'll get into, as I said, at the end of my talk, we'll get into cruising boats as well.
Anybody else along the panel here like to...
I'll field it.
Yeah?
I'll field the question. I think that the long-distance records, the transatlantic and others, will be shattered. Totally shattered in the next 5 years. I really believe that. I think it may start with the sort of offbeat ones like Dakar, Guadeloupe, but they're all going to fall to foils, no question. It's only a question of reliability, and it's getting better and better and better. So how could it not?
And in your presentation, we've obviously heard a lot about multi-hulls, and with the recent America's Cup, the development was all sort of very, very fast and very frequent. In fact, we started the America's Cup with downwind foiling, and we ended up with upwind foiling in that little time.
We started the America's Cup with no foiling.
No foiling, yeah. It was very interesting when you mentioned about the monohull and the larger monohull, let alone the moths, which we've understood has been foiling for many years now. But you mentioned the monohull. I mean, do you see that leading to speed records or?
Oh, is speed rocket a monohull? Is it?
Well, good question.
It's not really a multi-hull either. It's a pure foiler in a way, the second generation of it. I think that the first generation of sail rocket was a monohull for the most part, and I think that as you continue to decouple your performance ability from your keeling, like they did by inclining the sails and aligning the foils to take the loads, I think that it's inevitable that the monohulls will fly and more reliably and bigger, because you're going to start decoupling, as I put, also mass. The way we are trying to do it is with foils on the keel to replace some of what we need statically, hydrostatic sense. And eventually I think that will grow into less and less mass, easier and easier foiling, less and less loads in the boat while it's out of the water.
I'd just like to take a very controversial view that it's got to be fun, of course, and small is beautiful. And it's not surprising that small boats fly more easily. You only have to use the cube law to realize why a supertanker isn't getting on foils, and even the big aircraft are pretty tricky. But just take two boats, the current generation of foilers, which are unbelievable, and I take Mayfly, which no design credit, but I was the owner and there all those years ago. And Mayfly was more fun to sail than anything. And I imagine that these new moths are more fun to sail than anything. And all I want is someone offer me a ride when the wind gets up, and I'll die happy. But I think that the small and beautiful is very important. And with the exception of breaking ocean records and the publicity they get and attract, I think that as you get bigger, of course the problems get greater. And if it wasn't for the records, it's a wonderful stimulus. I don't think recreational large boat sailing would involve hydrofoils because of the complexity and the hazards and the prescribed range of conditions you have to put in. So you forgive me, but I'm just saying small is beautiful.
I'm just talking about where moths might go. I think the last few years, a lot of work's been going to aerodynamics. We're reducing drag in the air, and we've got fairings on things that nobody thought about a while ago. The consequence now, I think, the extension of that will be that all the appendages above the wings and the fittings and everything will shrink in size and be much more streamlined. And eventually, I think the crew, the skipper's going to have to probably not hike, but sit in behind something or other, because windage just becomes so big. And we saw that was a big difference between Oregon and New Zealand. The aerodynamic package on Oregon was better, and they ended up getting an immediate advantage on the wind legs. So I think windage is becoming more important as we go so fast through the air. And as such, because that's going to be a lot more effective on moths than it is on boats with two hulls and a whole lot of other stuff sitting up in the air. I think that's going to be an limitation on the It
was interesting. Now, 2 or 3 years ago, I think the moths had their world championships in Belmont in Lake Macquarie, where the wings first appeared.
Yes.
I mean, I guess one question would be: Do you see that returning, or is that a question of cost?
Most of this year building one. I don't think it's good for the class. It's terrible. It's spent so much time and effort in it, and I don't know whether it's going to work yet. It's a big expense to experiment on in moths. Moths traditionally has been a tinkerer's boat where people had an idea, built it, tried it, and it worked. So all the analysis that we've seen this morning is definitely necessary if you want to spend $1 million. It's not necessary if you want to spend a couple of $100. You just build it and try it. Andrew has done a lot more computer work than most people, and I think once you get into manufacture, it's absolutely necessary. You need it for the tooling anyway. But a lot of the experimentation in moths over the years has been just people were building stuff in their shed because they had an idea.
But is the foiling package very different for use with a soft sail as for a wing, or are they?
No, well, it hasn't been. The two boats that have had wings so far are just standard foiling package. I'll tell you in 6 months' time whether my idea's any good. There's no point telling anyone much until it sees it works.
Sure.
But no other tinkerers, there's hardly any tinkerers left. 80% of the class by make two, or an exercise, or other good day. The tinkerers have gone. People just like sailing the boats because they're great to sail. And so there's not going to be enough tinkerers to develop anything that's better. The manufacturers aren't interested because if you produce this thing commercially, it would cost as much as a boat. That was just fine. 5 people will buy them, win the regattas, and everyone else will be pissed off and leave. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's just something I've had in my head for a long time and promised myself I'd do it. And then even if it goes fast, I won't win races to do it anyway.
Okay, any queries or questions from the floor? There must be some questions for this fine group of panelists here. Anybody?
I'd like to address my question to Martin Fischer. You present us the L-foil, and my question is whether somebody was trying that the tip of the L will point not up but down, because when it points up and coming to the surface, it loses the efficiency, whereas pointing down, the efficiency will be higher.
Actually, you can achieve the same sort of the same stability with the tip that goes down, but then in order to get it heave stable, it must go outward and down. Yeah, and if you don't have any control mechanism, then what happens then is if you have the camber here, so in that case the suction side of the foil switches at the angle from one side to the other, and that reduces the effective span, or the aspect ratio. So the effective aspect ratio goes down to half, basically, and that increases drag. So such a foil, you can achieve the same heave stability with such a foil, but the drag is significantly higher. On the other side, the righting moment is also higher, so one has to check which one works better, or which effect is bigger.
Is that with the air flexibility?
No, it's up. That would be outside the rule. You have to see the maximum.
So they've gone there, like a tunnel top there.
Yes, the A-class, they go down and inward, but they go with two foils. I mean, they are only stable because they have two. They cannot sail on one foil.
Thank for Mario. It's about the supply drag.
About, sorry?
About the amount of drag caused by the supply.
Mm-hmm.
And as we can see, the amount of the foil we have, where we have an inserted profile on the person's face, the supply is very little. In the foil, like the hotel, we have a lot of drag. So I'm interested about the amount of the drag and if the supply drag can be accumulated with the induced drag.
With what?
The induced drag.
Yes, is I would say that when you have a free surface, you can you have wave, you have spray, you have induced drag, you have pressure field that generate drag. And it's difficult to say what is induced drag, what is wave drag, what is spray. The other thing is that probably spray drag can be important, but not so important compared to the visual effect that it can give. So you can have a very big spray, but if we measure or if we compute the drag associated with it is not so big compared to the viscous drag of a foil that we cannot see Visually, we cannot see the friction, we see the spray, so we think that is something very important. There are very simple formula that you can find on books that gives more or less an indication of a spray deck quantity, basically related to the thickness of the foil and the speed. And what we are trying to do is to have more insight in this field. Honestly, I don't have a final answer of how to reduce the spray drag. We try to learn more.
Some more technical questions from the floor?
I've got questions for whomever would like to try to answer it. It seems that the CFD and engineering results have become so refined that a lot of it hinges on the quality of the input mesh itself. And I've never seen really hard work, but I'm wondering how much development is happening on the actual generating of the mesh before you put it in the model.
Mm-hmm. So the big bottleneck of CFD has always been the meshing. So we can have a very good mathematical model, but we crash against meshing complex body. There has been a lot of development, so we can use now very different kind of measure, very different methodology. And honestly, I mean, 10 years ago, I used to work with a structure mesh that are very good for the result, but very difficult to use when you have something more complex than a single foil. I mean, the foil, if you have something more, I mean, if you want to measure Formula One car and do CFD, you need something more easy, that can handle intersectional geometry and so on. Then there are other methods that are meshless. So, like a particles method, where you don't mesh the volume of a fluid, but you use other techniques. For very complex body and for a very complex movement of the body, this can be a possible way, a possible improvement for sure.
How many cells are we talking about when you were talking about a full simulation of iron? How many cells are we talking about?
We have done some simulation of a 72 fully uplanded in waves, and we are talking about 100 million cells, but probably you need more to have a very good result. But it's something that you can easily manage nowadays. Yes. 15 years ago, we used, 1 million cells. It was, Alessandro Castelli was working with me at EPFL. 1 million cells was already something difficult to manage, but it's just a matter of computational power.
Further questions? See a hand come up over here. Yeah.
With the moth, you find quite a difference between all to water. There's not a huge difference, but it's enough to make a difference, but it's quite a large difference in the way it works, particularly with inflation, and how the bond affects the flow over the oil. I have a suspicion of what it is, but does anyone actually trained with it? It seems during about 16 degrees in hot water that we get quite a change in what happens with ventilation. Does anyone know any work?
Can you describe the difference? Cold water does what?
The cold water you start to ventilate. Well, it starts about 16 and gets progressively worse as it gets cold. And if the vertical sections are bad, it's terrible. Like our blade runners used to ventilate really bad, it makes it better. But it's still, you can notice if you have the foil very much in line with the verticals, a lot of, and disturbance, you get much worse problems in cold water.
The answer's down there.
The answer's down here?
The answer's definitely down there. Or it's fake. You should
Sounds like we might have to do some homework on that one and come back tomorrow with something.
Ventilation is a very difficult phenomenon because it's like I run experiments in a towing tank where the water is perfectly steady and constant temperature, running foils, and you do a run at 40 knots and everything goes well. And the next run you just hit a particle on the water or a little something on the water. You go through that and the ventilation explodes. So in general, ventilation is a very, very difficult phenomenon. And I know that all the most sailors report what you just reported. The temperature has something to do with it. Personally, I find it very difficult to find a correlation. It has to do, for sure, most probably with the stability of the boundary layer somewhere at the interface. But
probably what you have. Sorry, you said something in this room, but I missed the word.
Stability of the boundary layer is what I think you said.
Before
that it's an unstable, it's something that is a little bit difficult to predict, even for numerical tools. Correct me if I'm wrong, but numerical is very, very difficult to. Cavitation is predictable, ventilation is much less. And even experimentally, it's very difficult to. You have to. If you go on the web, I'm sure you've seen videos of people trying to get ventilation, so touching the flow just before the leading edge of an airfoil and obviously triggering the ventilation. So it's pretty particular. You know. And it's true there is water temperature related.
I have a theory.
The solution, of course, is to sail close to the equator.
Are there, gentlemen?
Yeah, Chris Edison, just to chip in on that. I agree with what the panel said. It's really very good.
Noise clean out.
Oh, yeah, I agree with the panel. It's a very difficult problem to model ventilation. We've done some work on it. Can't answer your question. But all I can say is we had a problem with ventilation on sea life. The only way we could get a handle on it is to do high speed photography. That's actually saying. And what we discovered is, I mean, a lot of ventilation work is done on 2D seconds, something and so on. But what we discovered is a very pretty product. So it is the immersion is changing. You're getting some really interesting effects. Air actually trains on the surface. So as the immersion increases, that air will remain attached. This is tiny bubbles of air. Just momentarily, we're probably talking about this attack. And that will allow ventilation to then trigger. So really just by way of an illustration of how difficult the problem it is to model. As I say, we didn't take that working further because we actually solved the immersion problem. So we said there's a range of challenges and we get that problem. So, I mean, my view is if you get a look at this slope here, what's going on with that, you might have to do it. So I think I'd be interested to have this but I think, as I say, our experience is and you've got to do that afterwards. Trying to look at the surface, you won't see it. And as I say, when we did it, it's amazing how much we learned. That's not in the public pages. So.
Maybe I can add another comment about ventilation. I've been working on surface piercing propeller design for many years, and in that case, the section are designed to promote ventilation. And when you do this, you have a code that predict very well what you designed for. So you will predict ventilation very well. It's a little bit more complex when you design a section not to ventilate, and in perfect condition is not ventilating, but in a steady condition with, depending on the quality of the water, you can have very different results. So we have a codes, but it works very well when you want to promote the ventilation, and for sure is the physics, the reality is much more complex when you want to analyze something that is designed to not ventilate.
I have a question for the historian. If ventilation from the wand, or induced by the wand, on the main foil is a notorious problem, why is the wand where it is?
It's offset.
It's offset to one side, and does that lead to a port-starboard variation in this effect? Naturally,
Yes.
it must.
The top sailors that make adjustments on port and starboard tack to compensate.
Okay. And what other locations have been experimented with in the history of the class? What other locations for the wand have been experimented with?
People have tried them on the back of the centerboard, which is what the laser kit does.
Right.
That proved adequate in smooth water and hopeless in rough water.
Okay.
It seems to be the distance we have is about right, which is coincidental really, because the bow was always there and the centerboard's moved forward about this far since we started foiling. There is an English boat which has the centerboard and the mast further forward, and they've put a strut out the front with a wand on the end of that. We have a limit of 0.5 metre front and back for any extra bits, excluding the rudder, so they can only go out 0.5 metre. But generally speaking, if it's in front of the foil, we have it raked off centre so that it doesn't, the weight doesn't interfere with the
and
centre.
laterally off of the front of the wings?
Yes, the people have tried one on either wing and operating the flaps independently. It didn't work particularly well. Ended up, there was a structural problem in that the flap was very strong when it's in one piece. If you cut it in half, the hinges have got a much more load on them and you tore a hinge off. And unless you have some differential system, the boat sails vertical, which we found is slow. We have to sail the boat heel about 20 degrees to windward, so that the lifting foil then also contributes all the lateral resistance, and the vertical foils fly at 0 angle of attack and have half the drag.
Right. Yeah. More efficient foil, asymmetrical.
Yeah.
When you have a theme that along the corporate,
That certainly tested the grey matter. Any further? Yes, go.
From the sailor perspective. What would you see as, since we are talking about progressive foiling, also in ocean-going vessels and all this, what do you see as a sort of speed limit that, let's say, a single-handed monohull like Moss can do in a few years, and an ocean-going vessel can do in a few years from now? What are you thinking of? Are we going to do around the world at 60, 70 knots, or 50 or 40? And can, let's say, most kind of boats in a few years reach 35, 40? Do you see something like that happening? And yes, no, why?
Any takers on this one?
Martin?
Sorry?
Would you like to just kick that one off?
Yeah, well, I don't think that we will sail around the world at 60, 70 knots. I think cavitation is a real problem. Of course, you can design foils that work perfectly, or sections that work perfectly when they're fully cavitated, but at least up to now, they're very bad at lower speed. And it's very difficult, I think, to get a foil setup that works with cavitation and without. Of course, we could imagine to have different foils, and you swap foils basically as a function of speed. Don't know. Could be engineering. It's an engineering solution then. Let's put it that way. If cavitation remains an issue, then that basically limits the speed.
250.
Yeah, below 50.
Below 50. So I'd say that you go more towards getting your lift out of the air when you get to those speeds. You'd have a sailing in front of
I think for the cross-Atlantic record, which is already very fast, it's a difficult one to beat, but the sail rocket concept could work. Obviously,